Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like Diamond's got a whole crew here, a fantastic and great looking crew. And we're going to be talking about 9 kind of weird, unique creatures, animals, whatever you want to call them, types of wildlife that if you see it around your fishing spots or areas that you are scouting, you should absolutely stop what you're doing and fish that area. This came about on a prior podcast. We were talking about things that we like to see when we're out there that are kind of dead giveaways for really good fishing spots. And we're like, let's do a whole podcast on this. So you guys ready to do this? Richard, Tony, Austin, Wyatt, Luke?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
So I will start sharing my screen for those of you who are watching. You will be able to see what we're doing here. And number 1, oh dog, that's not it. Oh, I just ruined it. Oh my, there, number 1, raccoons. That's what happens when you're live. Now you know what one of the other ones is. So number 1 is a raccoon. Who wants to take this one? Why a raccoon in and around the water?
I could chime in there. I always see them up on the shorelines, digging around for crabs or shellfish, whatever it may be. They're looking for easy meals right along the shorelines, especially down here in Florida where we have the mangroves. I'll be fishing the shoreline and I'll see a raccoon just come out and just start, almost tinkering around with his feet, trying to spook up something off the bottom. And I usually find redfish around those areas too, because they're pushed up close to the shorelines, pretty much eating the same things that those raccoons are looking for. And they're also stirring up the bottom. So if there aren't fish there now, there's a good chance a fish may come check it out after that raccoon's gone, because they've just stirred up the area.
Going off of that point too, Tony, I've seen them do that as well, where they kind of walk out on the mud. I've even seen them where, they're in like a small pool of trapped, just like a redfish would be, and they're scooping up those little tiny, just small bait-sized grass shrimp as fast as they can with their hands, and a redfish is right next to them. So definitely a good sign.
And raccoons, they're kind of like mahi-mahi. They will eat and eat and eat. They just don't stop eating, and they're super smart. If you guys have ever been like camping and stuff, like these raccoons can get to anything. And guess what they're attracted to? Food. Like they are going to be in places that have food, and they love fish, they love crustaceans. It is an absolute dead giveaway. And I know, Richard, you guys have all mentioned on that last podcast that you've had some of your best fishing spots because you happen to be looking over on the shore and there's a raccoon there. Like, yeah, I'm gonna make a few casts there, and then boo bam sham, you guys are hooked up.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens so many times, it's a little bit more than a coincidence for sure. And I've seen them, just like Tony said, they eat crabs, small shrimp, all the same, type of bait, that a lot of your game species will eat. So good sign.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I've had them swim next to my kayak when I've been up in the marshes, and that's a good, the marshes can get a little bit confusing. It's a bunch of mazes of creeks and things like that, and you're always looking for something that's going to make you stop and work one creek a little bit more than the others. And raccoons definitely were a big one for me. We think about how they're going to get around, get food. A lot of times on those big tidal flats where there's, tide swings of 4 or 5 feet, those areas will dry up, and those raccoons will go walk around on the flat, and they'll pick up all those fish and everything that got beached, or the shrimp that are in the small pools. And just like, Richard and Tony said, it's a good indicator of what's going on over there. Another thing to note is, how big is that raccoon? I've seen a very good indicator of how good a fishing spot can be based on the size of the raccoon, for sure. Smaller raccoons up in the marshes, generally there's going to be some fish around them, but I've got one spot here, even in Texas, just a little spoil island. There's a raccoon there that's about the size of a Saint Bernard. And I literally mistook it for a dog the other day, but he's eating good. If he's living on a little spoil island and he's got that much weight to him, he's definitely getting a good source of food. And there's tons of redfish and trout, even flounder up in that little spoil island. So it's, take note of how big the raccoon is as well, because that's going to tell you how good it's eating. It's another thing.
Kind of going to a restaurant and seeing a skinny chef. You want to see a fat chef. Like you want to man, they're not eating their own food. I want to get filled up here. All right, so let's move on. Raccoon number 1. So if you're following along here, these are all animals, creatures. The next one is very odd. I spoiled it for you if you guys are watching via the video. These are all things that if you see them while you're either scouting or just fishing, either from shore or boat or kayak, stop immediately and fish that area. The next one, this is one that Austin brought up. I would not even think of this, but as soon as I saw the picture, I get it. And what is it, dude?
It is a sea roach. So if you've ever fished around bridges, jetties, rocks, period, rocks really seem to be what those guys are attracted to. They are everywhere, creepy, crawly little sea roaches. I think the real name for them is a Alligator or something really weird like that. But yeah, so the small fish will feed on those guys when they're falling in the water. And then, of course, when the small fish come, the bait fish come, then you're going to have some predator fish coming right behind it. So on top of having structure, you already got some sea roaches that are attracting your fish as well.
So
have you ever used these for bait?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Have you used them for bait?
I actually have not. I'd prefer not to touch them, but I know people have, and they've caught fish on them though.
Yeah, they're definitely hard to catch. I remember as a kid trying to catch those things, and it's way easier to catch the little slither crabs or little spider crabs than those roach things.
I see. I see a future video with Tony on how to catch sea roaches, aka Ligia or Ligia. It's got to be Ligia, right? Ligia.
Ligia.
Leave that one to Austin.
Tony.
Look at this. Look at that second row in the middle. Look at the size of that one.
Well, those are isopods. There's a difference between because what we're talking about, the Ligia or the sea wood lice, those are different than the isopods. The isopods are down, like at the Marianas Trench. What we're talking about hangs around on dock pilings. What's in that dude's hand right there, that's what we're talking
about. It's a sea cockroach. So I'm hearing this is a form of lice.
I guess.
Yeah, it's a type. It's literally scientifically a wood louse or wood lice. Like if you look it up, it's what it is. I mean, they're closely related to wood lice. It's disgusting. But there's usually sheep's head around them, and usually you can toss on those pilings. I mean, Luke, just thinking about the times we've gone after sheep's head in your docks and your canals. I mean, those things are crawling all over the pilings. And when I've gone after sheep's head on some bigger bridges, I mean, they're all over those areas. I mean, they're probably feeding on barnacles or little things like that. But I mean, I don't know if they're a main source of food for the fish. That's for Austin to find out. But I would think that, you see those things around pilings, it's going to give me more of a reason to go toss on them.
It sounds like somebody's going to have to do it. I might have to go put it to the test and put my money where my mouth is, huh?
Just don't put it in your hair. Have you guys ever had lice before? Oh, it's horrible.
Fortunately not.
My whole family had it. So good news, my wife only listens to like the unchurched episodes, not these other Salt String episodes. And like, she was like sworn to secrecy. You can't tell anyone. That was like last year. And fortunately, like we're all kind of indoors and didn't have anything going on. And it's like a 10 to 14 day. It's kind of like being in quarantine where, I mean, it just went from everyone in our family where you're having to put, what is it, oil? I don't even remember what it was, in your hair, like with a hairnet, and sleep in it every night to like kill, like basically drown these things out. It is absolute. And then you got to comb them out every morning and you just see, it's nasty. So yeah, I feel bad for whoever has to do this whole sea cockroach / lice video. Ugh.
All right. Well, now I'm itchy. So.
Oh boy. All right. Number 3, one that people are probably more familiar with, but maybe don't really consider it as a leading indicator of a good fishing spot. And that is the old stingray. Maybe not this big boy here, but in general, stingrays. Why is that?
So if you think about stingrays' diets, they're feeding on small crustaceans, crabs, things that are on the bottom. And if you were to examine their diet and a redfish's diet, I would say that those two would probably have the most overlap. Usually when I start seeing small stingrays, like the one that you can see in the second row from the right, about that size. Usually they look like about the size of like a dinner plate. Not any giant stingrays. I don't know if those guys are just up there hanging out or whatnot. But usually when I see the really small ones, that's a really good indicator for me. The ones that are on the bottom, not cow nose rays that are free swimming. The ones that are on the bottom that are kind of small. If I see those in the grass flats, up in the mud, flipping around, there's a very good chance that there's redfish in that area as well. And there's a lot of times that I'll see stingrays kind of kicking up mud. They're looking for food, and there'll be redfish right behind them, in that mud trail. So the stingrays themselves are a good indicator, but don't just glaze over them and see one and think, okay, there's a stingray here. Look around it, because there's a good chance that all the stuff that it stirred up is now prey for those redfish as well. So I always see stingrays in the areas where I'm having really good consistent redfish days. I don't think that trout hang around them too much. Do you guys see any other game fish besides reds around stingrays with any consistency?
I've seen snook. Sorry, when I was living down in Placida a year and a half ago, there's this bridge, and I would go to this spot, and I'd walk Otis over it every morning. And there were multiple times where I'd see a stingray, and this is like those southern rays, the rays on the bottom, like what I was talking about. And there'd be like 5 snook following it. And so the ray would be going along, and 5 snook right behind it. And then it would stop, and the snook would kind of just hang around, and then it would move. And I sat there and watched it for a while, and they literally followed it for like 30 minutes, and it finally went off into deeper water, and I couldn't see it. And I saw that multiple times. So I know redfish do it as well. I don't know about trout. Tony, you seen trout over your area?
No, haven't really seen trout, but I was going to say something about stingrays. Even if you don't see them in the area, what you'll see left behind is like a crater, almost looks like a crater on a sand flat or a mud flat. And that basically gives a fish a place to go to ambush prey, because it could be like 3-4 inches deep that the stingray, they usually dig a hole and just lay just underneath the sand, almost like a flounder would. And when they spook off or they go away, they leave a hole behind. So if you see those potholes, that could be a good place to fish too, because there'll usually be fish sitting in those potholes.
That's
Absolutely.
Great point.
Yeah, and even the big guys too, the big manta rays. When you see those guys out off the beaches jumping, I'm really not too familiar with if they do that everywhere, but I've seen them do that here in Jacksonville. And when you see them out there, a lot of the times you'll have cobia hiding underneath them. So if you see a bunch of fish out off the beach, likely it's because them stingrays are out there, and if they're really close in, you'll see them running too. You'll see a stingray jump. And the next thing you know, you got 10 boats running to that stingray and start trying to cast underneath them to see if there's a cobia hiding underneath them.
Yeah, and spotted eagle rays too. Basically, the bigger rays that are off the bottom, that's cobia time. Like I've caught some of my biggest cobia off of like big stingrays, manta rays, and spotted eagle rays. But then if it's a ray on the bottom, that's redfish territory. Like that's why I was mentioning those are bottom feeders. They're not traveling very far, so they're usually in an area with a lot of food. And that's redfish, sea trout, snook stuff. But if that thing's cruising, then a cobia comes to mind immediately. And that's so I always cast behind stingrays, just knowing that there's a pretty good chance cobia's behind it.
Luke, come to think of it, the last time I was down in Florida with you, we saw those 2 spotted eagle rays mating right next to where we were catching trout and redfish right on the shoreline with topwater. So that's again, case in point there.
All right. Stingrays. If you see stingrays, especially the ones on the bottom, look for redfish nearby. Because we're trying to do this a little bit more in tune with redfish, speckled trout, and snook, but mostly our favorite redfish. Next one up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Who can name all 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Bonus. Anybody?
Raphael, Michelangelo. I'm struggling. Donatello, yeah. And then who's the last one?
Oh, come on. He's a famous painter as well.
That's Michelangelo, isn't it?
No,
Leonardo.
Leonardo.
Right.
Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power. Come on, guys. Who's with me here? Jeez.
Been too long.
Oh, man, not for me. Young kids, I'm watching that stuff every week. Bringing back the old, like that. And the original Karate Kid, man, kids love that. We watched Harry and the Hendersons and the Keys. Just speaking of just great all-American flicks and TV shows, man. You guys remember that one, Harry and the Hendersons, where they bring the Bigfoot home?
Tangent alert.
My little daughter was dying laughing. All right. So why would a Bigfoot, aka, oh, where do we go here? Why would a turtle be a good sign for catching inshore fish like redfish or any fish at all?
Well, one of my best spots when I was living over in Melbourne and doing tournaments for big trout, it was little, like the sea turtles. That shell was about like maybe a foot in length at the longest length, and those little small turtles would be on a grass flats near Sebastian Inlet, and those areas had the biggest trout. Like that was literally our spots, and every time, like when it got on a good bite, those little turtles were around. So that's what I like to see. I like to see those little small turtles, and usually it's a sign that there's good, healthy grass, at least for the areas that I've been fishing.
Yeah, I'll add on that as well. It seems that I normally see them in the cleaner water. So if you're in a new area and you're concerned about, water clarity and stuff, and you're looking for cleaner water, then a sea turtle is normally a really good sign. I typically always see them in clean water, as well as offshore. I've noticed that normally when I see them just up hanging out on the surface, that they're actually over top of some type of bottom. I haven't really checked that inshore, to be completely honest, but I would imagine that it's probably the same case. If you just see them kind of hanging out on the top, there's probably something down there, because they got to eat too. I normally see them around jetties. And the same thing with cobia. They can be underneath turtles as well.
Yeah, I mean, turtles like structure, just like everything does in the sea, and for the most part, they like to be near structure. That's good. Anything else on that before we move on to the next one?
I think the smaller turtles, their diet consists of both meat and vegetation. And then when they get older, I believe it switches over to just vegetation. So if you see those smaller sea turtles, usually eating probably bait fish and things like that, which obviously the other predators eat.
Interesting. Going from a meat eater to a vegan.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about different types of wildlife, but there's different types of grass too. And there's definitely grass that I prefer for trout. I know Luke touched on this, but if there's certain grass that I can find, I don't know exactly, it might actually be called turtle grass. But there's a type of grass that I tend to find like really good numbers of trout in. Just you look at the back of a speckled trout, their back is literally meant to like mimic blades of grass as they're kind of laying in it. And usually those smaller turtles, like we've said, I always see them hanging around that good grass. I don't know exactly what that grass is called, but it's always like really good for trout. So I'll have to add another one to that in terms of the good grass.
That's awesome. That's great intel. Another bonus: who can name the sensei in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? He was a rat. I'll give you a hint. His
Master
name.
Splinter.
Master Splinter, man, what, this is great, Wyatt. I'm very impressed. Well done. Let's move on to the next one. Wow, I'm really impressed. Blue herons. Why do you guys like blue herons? I thought you were going to say egrets. Why blue heron?
So I'm I guess the bird nerd on the call, as well as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle nerd. In terms of, egrets versus herons, we look at what their diet's going to be. Usually the egrets are a little bit smaller. Those herons are after larger prey items. We'll see them even eat like big mullet, like the hogleg mullet. And generally we get larger predators after larger bait fish. So when I see a blue heron, and they typically don't hang out together either. They're kind of isolated, solitary animals. So when I see a couple of them stacked up on a shoreline, you'll see, generally a lot of game fish in that area, because those birds don't like being around each other, but they'll tolerate each other enough if there's a good source of food that they can all kind of get involved on. Egrets seem to be a little bit more okay with each other. So you'll see like big flocks of egrets on sandbars. And that's a good indicator as well. I'm not going to, dog on egrets, but when I see herons, that's generally a good indicator for me. Also, I can see how deep they're standing. I use them as depth indicators as well on a shoreline, because they're a little bit taller than the egrets, and they'll go out a little bit deeper for food. So I can tell, generally based on the size of a heron's body, how deep it is, and if it's feeding on something. It just gives me a little bit more data about the area that I'm fishing. But what I really like to see is, a couple of blue herons in one concentrated area, because they don't like hanging out with each other. And if you see them, together feeding, there's a good chance there's a lot of food in that area for them.
Yeah, and they're incredibly patient, right? So if you had the patience of an egret or any kind of bird, and you had super thin legs and you like fish and crustaceans, what would you do? You'd sit there and wait in the water until they came right up next to you and pluck them out. It's right. I mean, they sit there like a statue, sometimes for like an hour, just patiently waiting. Such cool birds.
I think we could learn from them on that, actually. That's they're quiet and they sit really still for a reason, because they don't want to scare the fish away. We got to do the same thing sometimes.
Ooh, that's real cute, Austin. Real cute. So Wyatt, you don't take Wyatt doesn't need anything. He doesn't need a compass. He's in the depth finder. He doesn't need to know any. He didn't need a watch. He's got his little hand puppet thing for the sun. Hey, it's about 2 feet deep over there, according to that blue heron.
Exactly. You use what nature provides, Joe. I don't need any fancy depth finders or anything like that. I've got blue herons on the shoreline.
Yeah, I definitely like the wading birds more than like the pelicans. I know that's always just a way better sign of good fish. I like the egrets. Just because they're so much easier to see. I agree that the blue herons are probably better, but those egrets you can see from so long. They're bright white. And at least around here, they're usually in front of like mangroves, like a darker backdrop, so you can see them from forever away.
Tony, what do you think? You like seeing herons?
Yeah, I didn't know the difference in names and all that, but whenever I see a long-legged bird standing in the water, there's usually fish around. They're plucking things out of the shallows. So wading birds are definitely a must.
Well, we got a bird nerd on our team now, so you can ask him anything you want. Speaking of bird nerds, this next one is right up Wyatt's alley as well. So we're going to move on to the next one, a Roseate. Oh, whoa! How do you spell the thing? Spoon.
I think it's Rosea.
ROS. There it is.
Yeah, there
Wow.
you go. Right up.
I can't even spell the thing. So I'm guessing if you guys are listening in, we're looking at a picture of this Roseate Spoonbill. It's pink, which I'm guessing means it's just eating shrimp all day long. Talk about this, Wyatt. You don't see these very often, at least not in my neck of the woods. Where are you seeing these bad boys?
Yeah, so I'm seeing them here in Texas, and when I've been down in Florida and I've seen them there, so I know that they're down there as well. They're not a very common bird to see, but whenever I see them, like if I see them and I'm burning through a channel going to like a spot that I've pre-planned, I will totally stop what I'm doing. I'll stop whatever I pre-planned, and I will go over to those spoonbills because those, they don't have a lot of options for feeding. If you look at their bill. And you're familiar with Darwin, those birds can't just eat whatever they want. They're kind of stuck to eating shrimp and really small crustaceans. The sharper beaks are more for bait fish, things like that. They can get shrimp as well, but those guys specifically are more involved with, shrimp, small crustaceans, which is again, it's almost like stingrays for me. Like I know that their diet overlaps with redfish so much that when I see them and I know that they're up on a shallow marsh waiting, and they've got their bills in the water, they're scooping around, I know exactly what those fish are feeding on because, those spoonbills are usually stopping to feed on small shrimp or small crabs. So I can go up there and know exactly what I need to be throwing, and that likely there's going to be some redfish in that area as well. I can tell you personally, I've never stopped at a spot where there's been spoonbills and not caught redfish. That's like, and it's very rare that I'm able to say stuff like that, but they are like a dead giveaway for me on where there's redfish. You can see like they eat a lot of shrimp from the pink. Their bill is just designed to eat crustaceans. And I've literally, I don't know how many times I've stopped for them, but there's never been a time that I haven't caught redfish with them there.
That's powerful. What about, I'm confused on Darwin. Isn't Darwin your buddy with the Jeep and the gimpy leg? What's he have to do with this?
No, how the birds, like how their bills evolved to eat, like the herons, they have got sharp beaks. They can eat on the bait fish. They can eat on crabs. They can eat on shrimp.
Nerd, bird nerd. I'm just
bird nerd. Yeah.
I know who Darwin is. It's not your buddy with the Jeep. What about the rest of you guys? Are you guys seeing these? You seen them up in Jacksonville, Richard and Austin?
Yeah, so I actually never really noticed these birds until I started doing a lot more kayak fishing. Because just going back to Wyatt's point, these are shrimp eaters. I've even seen them where, they kind of make a zigzag pattern with their beak, just grabbing up shrimp like a vacuum. And like I said, there's always redfish. And another really key fish that's around them I've seen too is flounder, especially in like your lower tide stages, right off those drains. If those birds are near redfish and flounder, I've been very successful with.
I believe that that's the same bird that if you see two of them in the same area, they really don't get along. And correct me if I'm wrong, Wyatt. I really don't know that this is that exact bird because I didn't even know what their name was at all. But I'm pretty sure that this is the bird. If you see more than one in the same area, that is actually a really good sign because they don't get along at all. So they're there for a reason.
These guys are together.
Yeah, I usually see like a couple of them. I don't usually see them isolated. I know that with herons, they don't like each other just because they're much larger birds. I don't think they get along. You don't ever see herons all flying together. I've seen the spoonbills in groups before, but it's possible that it's a similar story with the herons. Usually, maybe I see a couple of them hanging out in an area. That's why I'm always catching redfish there. So I can't speak to that one for sure, but it seems like from a lot of the pictures we're seeing, they do hang out in small groups.
Well, dude, that's powerful, man. White says almost 100% of the time, if not 100. That's guys. If you see one of these things, fish it. Tony, you seen them in the lagoon? Luke in Tampa?
Yeah, they're all over the place here. I call them marsh birds. They're always in the marsh areas, really shallows. Again, going after shrimp. So very cool bird to see.
But yeah, when I do, that's a good sign. And in many cases, they're with egrets. It's almost most of the time they're kind of together, but they're in the good spots. Like they're in the spots with the most food, and that's where those redfish are gravitating towards as well.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one. Speaking of something that likes food and always seems to be around really good fishing spots is alligators and their distant cousin, the crocodile. We've posted that video down in way south in the Everglades, and it was probably the best fishing spot of the entire trip, and it was loaded with crocodiles who were sitting there eating food just like we were trying to catch. What are your guys' thoughts? Because we got gators that are now moving into salt, and you got crocodiles that are even down in Florida. What's been your experience?
So I've covered quite a bit of shoreline down in Mosquito Lagoon, Banana River, Indian River, central east coast of Florida, and those areas are loaded with gators, but sometimes you can go miles without seeing one. And there have been quite a few trips where I do go, 2 or 3 miles down a shoreline, not seeing any signs of life. And I'll notice an alligator's head sticking up out of the water. And when I get closer to that area, I start seeing bait fish. I start seeing just more activity and start catching redfish. And I was actually fishing, I think this was a week or two, or about 2 weeks ago. I was on a school of black drum, and there was a gator laying on the bottom that spooked the whole school. I mean, they almost jumped out of the water when that gator came up. So if there's a gator around, I usually find fish.
That's pretty cool.
The crocodile stories. So just in case, if anybody hasn't seen that YouTube video, it's amazing, where we're fishing down in Flamingo, and there actually are crocodiles in Florida. We had a lot of comments saying that we were idiots, that it wasn't a crocodile, that it was an alligator. There literally are some crocodiles in the Everglades, but it was like the best spot that I've ever fished for snook. It was a point. It was like the textbook spot, a point with a lot of good current flow, some down trees, a lot of structure, and some depth changes. And there were these 2 crocodiles just posted up right there. And yeah, that was just an amazing spot. We fished it for what, Joe, probably like an hour, maybe 2 hours. And we're catching snook the whole time. And those crocs end up coming close to the boat, as you'll see, or as you saw in that shrimp rigging video. It was an amazing day.
Yeah, we caught quite a few different species. What about you, Wyatt? Any alligators, crocs over there in Texas?
So they're here, but they're a little bit further inland. I do have some buddies that do a lot of kayak fishing around here, further up. And when they go after those redfish that are a little bit more inland, they're almost, there's a lot of freshwater drum here as well. But in the areas where you're catching redfish, alongside bass and catfish. They tell me that heavy concentrations of alligators are a good indicator to them as well. I mean, here you can, I don't know if you can actually do it in Florida, but gator hunting is pretty big here when they're in season. And a lot of times, when they're out gator hunting, they're fishing as well. So it's just one of those things that you can count on there being a lot of game fish in the same areas as alligators, because a lot of times that's what they're feeding on as well. So something to keep an eye out for, but also to be careful because those guys have some pretty gnarly teeth on them.
Joe, I remember you saying on our last podcast about how you were going under the water and you could actually see everything that was going on because you had goggles on and you were down there. Well, I kind of think of gators and crocodiles of somebody that's doing that for you because they got to eat and they're there for a reason. And they're putting on the goggles for you and going down there and looking for the fish.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Strap a
and
GoPro
they're
on that
feeding on the
gator.
birds and the raccoons. Like they're the ultimate predator. They're there for everything. So that's just again another those gators and crocs will just gravitate toward the area with the most life.
Love it. All right. Speaking of the ultimate predator, sharks up next. Sharks. This one is I don't know. This one, I don't know if this is going to make the list or not, but it definitely is because I think a lot of people have a misconception about sharks. And hey, I'm fishing in a different area if I'm just trying to catch sharks. But to all your guys' point, I mean, you got a predator like this, they want to be around food, not in a dead zone. So who wants to talk about sharks and specific types of sharks when we're talking about inshore saltwater fishing and redfish?
Yeah, let's take great white off of there. So you don't want to see great white. Like bonnet heads, black tips, and bull sharks would be the three that are most commonly seen on the flats, and all three of them are a good sign of redfish, sea trout, snook.
I'd say all the sharks that are under 4 feet in length. If you see a shark that's bigger than that out on the flats, I'd probably get out of there.
Yeah, I would agree. And what's cool about them is normally, my main experience is with bonnet heads, and you'll see their fin like literally coming out of the water right at the surface, and it's a dead giveaway. You're not going to miss it. And so I think a lot of people would run though and say, "Oh, I'm not fishing there. I'm not fishing for sharks today." But I've caught a lot of redfish, a lot of big trout right alongside with my bonnet head sharks, and I know where they're at because I see them. Yep.
I mean, let's face it; these bonnet heads are not going to be on a flat that's dead of life. They want to be in a flat that has a lot of bait and obviously other predator fish. What else? So you said black tip. I'm going to put bonnet head at the top unless you guys think differently. Is there any other ones?
I like seeing bull sharks too. It's a little bit spooky seeing them, those are a dangerous shark, but big and small bull sharks is a good sign. Before you get off bonnet head though, if you do want to catch the bonnet heads for whatever reason, the Alabama leprechaun on a twist lock hook is like, they love it. Like I always throw at sharks just because it's fun. I love sight fishing, and bonnet heads are really picky. Like they mostly eat shrimp. I think like their head is designed to pick off stuff like from the bottom. But for whatever reason, this jerkbait, like they crush it. They will literally like go out of their way to suck it down.
And the power
on the Moonwalker the other day.
Really?
Was that you had one of the Moonwalker?
Yeah, it was when I came across those like 3 foot long ladyfish. There was bonnet heads mixed in with them. I got a black tip and a bonnet head on the Moonwalker.
That's awesome. Yeah, black tips. Yeah, those will hit top. But I've never had a bonnet head. That's amazing.
I'll add one more to the list. Spinner sharks. I've had spinner sharks inshore on the flats as well.
Too cool. Yeah, Tony, you killed it that one day on those bonnet heads with power prawn.
Yeah, I think I used probably caught 5 or 6 on the power prawn.
Yeah.
Still held up only on one.
That was wild. Sprayed a little Dr. Juice for added shark attractant. That's cool. All right, sharks. The next one. This is definitely a very odd but very cool creature. Only about 25,200 in the entire country right now, although a fast-growing population, very good-looking and attractive, does like to eat 3 meals a day. And I'm talking about Salt Strong Insider members. And we were obviously having a little bit of fun here, but we were talking about just odd creatures and things that we like to see. And it's other fishermen, but in particular, Insider members, because they're armed and dangerous with the 90-10 rule, meaning that 90% of all feeding fish are in 10% of any area at any given time. And we're teaching that every single week. Even like right after this, we have a live call that we do every week with our members to literally show them where they should be fishing every single weekend. And then Friday, we recap it in 10 minutes and get on a little satellite map and show you exactly where to fish every week. So if you see a Salt Strong member, you should probably remember, hey, this guy or gal probably knows what the heck they're doing, and would probably have a very distinct advantage. And they won't bite either, right? Most of you guys.
The safest of all of the items we talked
very
about.
Safe, very nice. So that's 9, but we have some bonus ones too. That was kind of a fun one. Who said it? Was it Loons and Dolphin? Those are other 2 that were kind of on the list. Who wants to take those?
Yeah, so loons are actually one of my favorite to see, and kind of by default, I found how important these fish were, and it's usually been when I have been on a hot trout bite. I'm talking about every single cast to a hole. Then all of a sudden, I would see a loon pop up, and what they're doing, these are all diving birds, and they're really big fin fish eaters, and they'll come up with big mullet, things like that. Even seen them eat some menhaden and things like that as well. And one of the things, if you see a loon, it can throw you off a little bit. So if you see this huge wake underneath the water that looks exactly like just a monster overslot redfish wake, it can throw you off, and you can think it's just a monster redfish, and then a little head pops up and it's a loon. But that's typically when I've seen them. So yeah, if I ever see a loon that's diving straight down, I'll throw like right next to that thing. Don't hit the bird, but pretty close, because there's some fish underneath, and a lot of times it's some probably a pretty sizable school of trout is what I've noticed.
Yeah, I'd say that's spot on. I've definitely seen them do in the wake before as well, and it definitely threw me off. But yeah, that was spot on, man.
What about your little bird friend, Luke? The old
I was about to say I call them water turkeys, but cormorant I think is the proper name. But cormorant they have like a little bit of a hooked beak, and then a similar bird called the anhinga or something like that. It's like a pointy nose, but they're both diving birds like this. And yeah, they're usually in pretty good spots. They're in spots where the bait fish are, which again attract. In many cases, I see those around trout spots. Not so much redfish unless they go up super shallow. In many cases, they don't like go up in the really shallows where the redfish most often are. They're usually off in the deeper water, and those are great signs for trout and lady. That's a good place to go take some kids out fishing, where you can catch trout, ladyfish, Spanish mackerel, like a whole long list of stuff. Because there's food there, and use those deeper predators will be out there.
Richard, for those listening, can you explain what a loon is? There might be some people who have heard the name but can't remember what it looks like.
Yeah, so typically they look very similar to a duck, but their head is a little bit narrower, and they've got a very long beak that's actually pretty pointy. And I mean, they look, probably about the size, if anyone has ever seen like a green-headed mallard. They're about that same size, a little bit bigger. But man, they are usually on the fish. If you see them diving, there's some active fish underneath, guarantee it.
Luke, what else floats?
A duck. Very small rocks, pebbles.
Roaches, apples.
Any Monty Python fans will appreciate that. I figured Joe would throw that out there.
A duck.
A duck.
Who is this wise man?
Yeah, and just one thing, just public service announcement: don't feed the birds.
Yes.
Apparently, people must be feeding them over here in St. Pete, and a lot of my favorite trout flats are just kind of getting just wrecked, because you'll be floating down, and there'll be like 4 or 5 cormorants, water turkeys, just all around the boat. And maybe they just figured out that we can't. They're protected species. And I think they just figured out that, or maybe they just figured out that the boat will spook off the pinfish that they then go grab. But either way, they're becoming a big nuisance.
This is when you're talking about here, Luke. This anhinga, the snake bird, and he's got a pinfish.
That's the pointy nose one, and basically the cormorant is very similar, but the beak is a little bit curved. Either way, they both feed on the same stuff, and sometimes you see them in the same areas. But
Cool.
yeah, all the wildlife, don't feed them. It's not good for them. It's not good for us.
Yep. All right. Speaking of another one that's usually in good spots and you don't want to feed them as well. Dolphin. Tony, what's your experience with the dolphin?
So the dolphin really give away more of where the fish would be. Because what I've found when dolphins are patrolling like the edge of a flat or they're on the deeper side of a school of bait fish, those predator fish are usually pushed up super shallow on the other side of the school of bait fish where the dolphins can't get to them. So whenever I see dolphins, working the edge of a flat, I'll push up as shallow as I can get on that flat to look for fish. And they're almost working together to, school up the bait fish. You got the predator fish on one side, then you have the dolphin on the other side, and the bait fish are stuck right in the middle. So if you do find dolphins, don't get discouraged. Just push up shallow because those fish are going to try to get away from them.
That's good. Cool. Well, guys, I'm seeing we got a bolt to get on this next call. Anyone have anything else? White Call Wyatt, aka Bird Nerd. I love, man, you're so good with the nicknames and you take it so well. Any other birds or things you can think of?
No, I mean, ospreys, I'll say that as the last one. If you ever see any ospreys, I believe that's more of a Florida bird. I haven't seen too many of them here in Texas. In fact, I might not have seen any now that I'm thinking about it. But if you're down in Florida, you see an osprey. Those are great indicators of a good trout spot. They don't typically pick up redfish. I would think they'd probably pick up maybe rat reds here and there. But I see a lot of ospreys when I'm down in Florida with trout in their claws or flounder. When I was in North Carolina, I'd see them carrying off flounder. They go and they get over those flat tidal marshes and they go down the easy target for them. But those birds, their entire diet is based off of those game fish that we go after. So typically they're going to be hunting some of the smaller fish. So if you see ospreys diving in an area, I'd push a little bit deeper. Generally the smaller fish are up a little bit shallower. But they're a great indicator of where game fish are. They might have scared off a couple, but it's the same thing with dolphins. Kind of take note of where they were diving on, where that fish was holding when they got a hold of it. And it can kind of clue you into what the pattern is. But ospreys are great. Again, another Bird Nerd exclusive there.
And overall, it's kind of like structure where the more there is, the better. So if you see one thing that's cool, if you see two, that's way better. If you see like 4 or 5 of them, then you're in a good spot, right? And this is, and I can't remember if we caveat this at the beginning, but this is all in addition to the obvious stuff like actual bait fish or jumping mullet. But basically, the more life you see in a spot, the more likely there's going to be some good fishing, in particular redfish, sea trout, snook, flounder as well.
Yep. I mean, that's what we're all about, is just giving you guys a little advantage here and there, the upper hand, if you will. That's what we all want, right? We all want to go out there and maximize our time, catch more fish, especially more inshore slams and more redfish, speckled trout, and snook, flounder per trip. And if that sounds like you, come and join us in the Insider Club. Like I said, we're about to get off and do a live coaching call. We do it for an hour every single week with all of our members or any members that want to join. It's great, especially if you're about to go out that week or that weekend, have questions or a new spot and just want some help. It's completely free. It's like being able to get on a call with a bunch of pro fishing guides and just ask them questions and get some really, really amazing feedback. Just shortcut galore. So if that sounds like you and you want to save money on all your tackle, then come join us at saltstrong.com in the Insider Club. 100% money back guarantee. I think we now have a 200% money back guarantee, which is crazy, that if you don't catch more fish and save money on your tackle, then you don't pay. We've made it a complete no-brainer, and we'll actually pay you if you think it wasted your time. So absolute no-brainer. That's why we have 25,000 plus members. Really from Texas to Virginia is kind of like the main area, but we now have members in all 50 states and 4 or 5 different countries now. Pretty awesome. But guys, we'll jump off. This is really cool. This is a unique one. I don't think it's one that we've covered. We've always kind of peppered a lot of these things into some of our teachings that we do for our members, but we've never done one that's just for hey, here's the 9 kind of interesting and weird creatures and animals. So this is pretty cool. You guys have any questions, let us know. We'll put this over at saltstrong.com in the fishing tips section, and you can leave a question down below. It'll come to us and we'll get back to you. And if you have any other animals or creatures or sea slugs or the cockroach thing is still, if you have anything else that you think is just a leading indicator or hey, bing, 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 this is a great spot to fish, let us know. We'd love to add it to the list. Guys, appreciate you.
Take it easy, guys.
We out. Take her easy. Now, how do I? I got to stop share first, and then we done.